The shriek of stressed metal was a song Xyler had only ever heard in simulations. It was a dissonant, terrifying chorus that vibrated through the delicate bones of his feet and up his slender spine. As the chief xenobotanist of the Elthar survey ship Stellara, his life had been one of sterile labs, quiet contemplation, and the gentle hum of perfectly calibrated systems. Now, the universe was screaming. Red lights painted the bridge in strokes of panic, and the faces of his crewmates, usually serene masks of intellectual focus, were stretched taut with a primal fear their species had long since forgotten. Gravimetric shear, a pilot's voice, thin and reedy, crackled over the comms. Unplotted, unstable, we are caught. Xyler gripped his console, his three-fingered hands struggling for purchase on the smooth, cool surface. On the main view screen, the serene tapestry of hyperspace had torn open, revealing a churning vortex of gravitational chaos. The Stellara, a vessel designed for observation and not conflict, was being pulled apart like fragile parchment. He watched the ship's integrity readings plummet, a cascade of numbers spelling their doom. There was no time for analysis, no time for the careful, methodical problem-solving that defined his people. There was only the raw, overwhelming certainty of imminent destruction. The final lurch threw him from his station. He felt a moment of weightlessness, a silent, suspended breath in the heart of chaos, before gravity reasserted itself with punishing force. His head struck a bulkhead and the galaxy dissolved into a silent, painless dark. Consciousness returned in fragments, a slow tide of aching awareness. The air was the first offense. It was thick, heavy, and wrong. It smelled of decay and strange, cloying blossoms, laced with a metallic tang that burned his respiratory membranes even through the emergency filter of his breached suit. He coughed, a dry, rattling sound in his throat. He pushed himself up, his limbs feeling like leaden weights in the planet's heavy gravity, which he estimated at 1.2 times their home world standard. He was in what remained of the botany lab, his sanctuary. The dome of reinforced plasteel above had been ripped open, exposing a sky the color of a poisoned bruise, filtered through a colossal, interlocking canopy of alien flora. Strange, fungal growths, pulsing with a soft, internal blue light, clung to the twisted girders of the ship. Outside, a symphony of unnerving sounds replaced the silence of space. The chittering of 1,000 unseen things, the distant bellow of something immense, and the incessant, rhythmic dripping of moisture. "Lyra," he called out, his voice hoarse. "Is anyone functional?" A weak moan answered him. He stumbled through the wreckage, his lanky form ill-suited for navigating the debris. Elder researcher Lyra, her robes torn and stained, was pinned beneath a collapsed support beam. Her leg was twisted at an impossible angle. "Xyler," she breathed, her large, dark eyes wide with pain and shock. "The others," he didn't need her to finish. A glance around the mangled section of the ship told the story. Of the 12 souls in this section, only he and Lyra seemed to have survived the impact. He activated his wristcom, trying to hail the bridge, the engine room, anyone. Static was his only reply. Their delicate communication network, like the rest of their advanced technology, had been shattered. "The beacon," Lyra rasped, her focus absolute even in her agony. "We must activate the long-range distress beacon." Working together, or rather with Xyler doing the work and Lyra providing guidance, they managed to cannibalize several power cells and rig a direct feed to the emergency transmitter. It was a crude, inefficient setup. The signal would be weak, a whisper in the cosmic void, but it was their only hope. As he made the final connection, the beacon pulsed once, a faint chime of confirmation, before the system went dead again. The power cells were drained. "It is done," he said, slumping down beside her. "Now we wait." Waiting on Xylos-Seven, as they would come to call it, was its own form of torture. The planet was a masterpiece of lethality, a world that had perfected the art of killing. The air, a noxious cocktail of methane and unknown compounds, required them to wear their rebreathers constantly. The limited supply of filter cartridges became their hourglass, each expended one a grain of sand slipping away. The flora was a deceptive wonder. Towering trees with bark like obsidian scraped the purple sky, their canopies dripping a viscous, acidic sap. At night the entire jungle floor came alive with a ghostly bioluminescence. Fungi cast eerie blue and green light, mosses glowed a soft, pulsing red and vast, web-like lichens shimmered with captured starlight. It was beautiful, but it was a beauty that hid countless teeth. Razorvine, thin and nearly invisible, would lash out at movement, its monomolecular edges capable of slicing through their suits. Spore fungi would erupt in clouds of psychoactive dust, causing crippling hallucinations. And then there were the predators. The first one they saw was a pack of creatures the size of large canids, their bodies sleek and insectoid, with 6 legs that carried them over the gnarled roots of the forest floor with silent speed. They had watched from the relative safety of the wreckage as the pack brought down a lumbering herbivore, swarming it with a terrifying, coordinated savagery. The Elthar, a species that had evolved without natural predators for millennia, could only watch in horrified fascination. They were observers by nature, but now they were observing the very mechanics of a food chain in which they were suddenly, terrifyingly, a part. Their own technology was of little use. Their phasers, calibrated for geological sampling, could do little more than irritate the local fauna. The ship's defensive systems were obliterated. They were trapped, their intelligence a useless tool against brute force and evolutionary perfection. The true apex predator of Xylos-Seven revealed itself on the 3rd cycle. They had heard it before, a deep, guttural roar that seemed to shake the very air, but they had not seen it. It came for them in the thick, humid twilight. They called it the gravemaw. It was immense, easily 9 meters long, a reptilian quadruped built with an impossible combination of bulk and grace. Its hide was a chameleonic armor, shifting in patterns of shadow and dim light that made it almost invisible until it moved. 6 crimson eyes, arranged in a semicircle on its armored head, scanned the jungle with cold, predatory intelligence. Its most terrifying feature, the one that gave it its name, was its jaw. It could unhinge and split open, revealing not 2 but 4 mandibles lined with serrated teeth like shards of volcanic glass. It didn't charge, it stalked. It circled their wreckage, a ghost in the glowing jungle, its presence felt more than seen. The Elthar survivors, only 5 of them left now, huddled together, their advanced minds reduced to the simple, stark terror of prey. One of the engineers, driven by desperation, fired his sampling phaser at the creature. The beam of light splashed harmlessly against its hide. The gravemaw's response was immediate and devastating. It lunged, a blur of motion that defied its size. The plasteel hull of the Stellara shrieked as the creature tore into it, peeling it back like fruit rind. The engineer was gone in a blur of reptilian fury, his scream cut mercifully short. The gravemaw fixed its 6 eyes on the remaining 4, and for the first time in his life, Xyler understood what it meant to be hunted. He understood the absolute, unthinking finality of nature's judgment. Their civilization, their art, their science, it all meant nothing here. Here, they were merely food. The human scout ship Vagabond was charting unauthorized asteroid fields on the fringe of the Perseus Arm, looking for high-yield mineral deposits that the big corporations had missed. It was a dirty, thankless job, but it kept fuel in the tanks and food in the recycler. Captain Eva Rostova was nursing a mug of something that tasted vaguely like coffee when the signal came in. "Skipper, got something weird," Jax, her pilot and heavy weapons specialist, grunted from his console. He was a mountain of a man, his arms a tapestry of faded tattoos from wars fought long before he'd signed on with her. "Faint, non-standard distress call. Looks like it's coming from the surface of that muckball." He pointed a thick finger at the main screen. Xylos-Seven. It had a big, red warning tag next to it in the nav charts, Class 4 Death World. Unsuitable for colonization. Lethal fauna, corrosive atmosphere, extreme hazard. "Non-standard how?" Eva asked, moving to stand behind him. "The modulation is all wrong. Higher frequency, complex wave pattern. It's not human, that's for sure." Chen, the ship's medic and xenobiologist, leaned in from his station. "The planet is inside the designated Elthar exploration sphere. Could be them. Their ships are primarily scientific. Not built for rough atmospheric entry, and certainly not for a planet like that." Eva stared at the swirling purple and green orb on the screen. The Elthar. She'd read the official first contact briefs. A reclusive, highly advanced species of intellectuals. physically frail, dedicated to peaceful observation. Lambs by galactic standards, lambs on a planet of wolves. "It's not our problem, Eva," Jax said, not looking at her. "Consensus rules are clear, no interference, and even if they weren't going down, there is a suicide run for 3 people. "That beacon is a call for help," Chen countered softly. "Doesn't matter who sent it." Eva remained silent, her mind racing through the probabilities. Jax was right. It was insanely risky. Their dropship, the Griffon, was tough, but Xylos-Seven was a meat grinder. But Chen was also right. Her entire life, from her hardscrabble upbringing on a barely terraformed moon to her years in the frontier marines, had been governed by a simple, unbreakable code. You don't leave people behind. "Jax, prep the Griffon," she said, her voice leaving no room for argument. "Load up Bravo 7, full enviro seals, and bring the negotiator. Chen, get the medical kits and the wide-spectrum antitoxins ready. We're going in." Jax sighed, a sound like grinding rocks, but he turned to his controls without another word of protest. He knew that look in her eye. It was the same look that had gotten them out of a dozen impossible situations before. The descent was rough. The Griffon bucked and shuddered as it punched through the dense, turbulent atmosphere. Alarms blared as atmospheric sensors flagged a dozen different corrosive agents. Through the forward viewplate, the jungle below was a seething, unbroken sea of alien green and shadow. "Landing zone is going to be tricky," Jax reported, his hands moving with practiced ease over the controls. "Best I can do is a semi-stable clearing about half a click from the beacon's source. Ground looks like a swamp." "Make it work," Eva said, sealing the helmet of her exosuit. The suit was a bulky, hardened shell of ceramic composites and reinforced alloys, designed for hostile environments. It wasn't elegant, but it was brutally effective. The landing was more of a controlled crash. The Griffon's landing struts sank deep into the soft, muddy ground with a sickening squelch. The moment the ramp lowered, the alien world flooded in. The air was a visible, humid haze, and the noise was a deafening, multi-layered cacophony. "Helmets on, filters active. Stay sharp," Eva commanded, her voice crisp over their private comms. She stepped onto the ramp, her kinetic assault rifle held at the ready. Jax followed, hefting the negotiator, a massive rotary cannon that looked like it belonged on a vehicle, not a man. Chen came last, carrying the medkit and a sensor pack. The ground beneath their armored boots was a treacherous soup of mud and tangled roots. Every step was a struggle. The bioluminescent flora cast long, dancing shadows that played tricks on the eyes. "Getting a lot of movement on the scanners," Chen said, his voice tight. "Small, fast-moving contacts all around us. Larger signatures, too, very large, about 300 meters bearing north." "That's the direction of the beacon," Eva noted. "Let's move, single file, watch your 6. Their journey to the crash site was a masterclass in survival. They moved with a purpose and efficiency that was alien to the Elthar. They didn't fight the jungle, they moved with it. They identified the razor vine by the slight shimmer it gave off and cut it down with precise bursts from their rifles. They spotted the spore fungi by the slight discoloration of the ground around them and gave them a wide berth. When a pack of the 6-legged insectoids burst from the undergrowth, Jax's negotiator roared to life. The sound was deafening, a physical blow that tore through the jungle's drone. The high-velocity tungsten rounds didn't just kill the creatures. They vaporized them, turning their charge into a spray of green ichor and shattered chitin. The violence was sudden, absolute, and terrifyingly effective. They found the Elthar huddled in the deepest part of the wreckage, their slender forms trembling, their large eyes filled with a despair so profound it was almost tangible. There were only 4 of them left. When Eva and her team appeared in the torn-open doorway, silhouetted against the glowing jungle, the aliens flinched back. The humans were gargantuan in their bulky armor, bristling with weapons, their faceless helmets giving them an aura of implacable menace. Eva raised a hand slowly, carefully. She switched her helmet's external speaker on. "We received your distress call. We're here to help." Her voice, filtered through the suit's translator, came out as a series of soft, melodic chimes, the Elthar language. Xyler stared, his mind struggling to process the scene. These beings were primitives by any technological metric he knew. Their armor was crude, Their weapons relied on chemical propellants and kinetic force, a technology his people had abandoned as inefficient eons ago. And yet they had walked through this nightmare world to reach them. Before Xyler could formulate a reply, a deep, earth-shaking roar echoed from the jungle, closer this time. The ground vibrated. "Contacts!" Jax yelled. "Multiple big ones, and they're coming fast." Xyler felt a cold dread seize him. "The grave maws," he whispered, the name a curse on his tongue. "They have come to finish us. Get behind us." Eva commanded the Elthar, her tone leaving no room for debate. She and Jax took up positions on either side of the breach, their rifles pointed out into the glowing gloom. Chen stood over the aliens, his sidearm drawn. The first grave maw burst through the trees. It was the Alpha, larger and more scarred than the others. It didn't hesitate. It charged, its four-part jaw gaping wide. One of the Elthar screamed, a high-pitched sound of pure terror. Eva didn't flinch. "Jax, lead target. On my mark, 3, 2, 1 mark." The negotiator and Eva's rifle opened up simultaneously. The sound was indescribable. It was not the clean, surgical hum of a phaser. It was the sound of controlled thunder, of pure, unrestrained power. The kinetic rounds, each one a solid slug of hyperdense metal, slammed into the grave maw's chest. Its chameleonic hide, which had shrugged off their energy weapons, shattered. Great chunks of armored flesh were gouged out. The creature staggered, roaring in pain and surprise, its charge faltering. Another grave maw flanked them, lunging from the shadows. Eva pivoted smoothly, a dancer in a suit of armor, and fired a sustained burst into its head. Several of its crimson eyes exploded in showers of gore. It thrashed, its massive tail whipping around and slamming into the ship's hull with the force of a battering ram, but it was already dead. Jax continued to pour fire into the Alpha, driving it back step by agonizing step. "Reloading!" he bellowed, ejecting a massive, smoking ammunition drum and slapping a fresh one into place with a speed that defied the cannon's size. The Elthar could only watch, paralyzed. Xyler's analytical mind struggled to comprehend what he was seeing. These humans fought with a kind of predatory grace he had only ever seen in the beasts of this world. Their movements were economical, their teamwork was flawless, and their violence was a tool they wielded with terrifying expertise. They were not just defending, they were exterminating. They were meeting the jungle's apex predator on its own terms and winning. The Alpha Gravemaw, grievously wounded and enraged, let out one final, deafening roar and charged again. "Eva, frag out!" Jax yelled, and Eva pulled a grenade from her belt, armed it, and rolled it perfectly into the charging monster's path. The explosion was a concussive blast of light and shrapnel that ripped the Gravemaw's legs out from under it. It collapsed in a heap, still trying to drag itself forward on its shattered limbs. Jax strode forward, planted his feet, and fired the negotiator point-blank into its skull until there was nothing left but a mangled ruin. The jungle fell silent. The cacophony had been replaced by the ringing in Xyler's auditory sensors and the heavy, ragged breathing of the humans over their comms. The air was thick with the smell of ozone, hot metal, and alien blood. 3 grave maws lay dead outside their shelter, their immense forms testifying to the shocking, brutal efficiency of the newcomers. Eva turned, her helmet retracting with a hiss to reveal a human face. It was a strong face, framed by dark hair plastered to her forehead with sweat. Her eyes, a pale, piercing gray, scanned the terrified Elthar. They were not the eyes of a savage, but of a protector. A weary, determined protector. "The area's clear for now," she said, her voice calm despite the carnage. "But more will come. We need to get you to our ship. Can you walk?" Xyler looked from her face to the annihilated predators, then back. His people revered life, studied it, cherished it. These humans, they were a paradox. They had come to save life by dealing death on a scale he had never imagined possible. And as he looked into Eva Rostova's steady gaze, he felt 2 conflicting emotions rise within him: profound, boundless gratitude and a deep, chilling fear. The journey back to the Griffon was a slow, terrifying ordeal. The half-kilometer trek felt like 1,000. The Elthar, including the injured Lyra who was being supported by 2 others, struggled with every step. Their slender bodies were not designed for this terrain, and their minds, accustomed to order and predictability, were reeling from the constant, pressing threat of the environment. The humans, however, seemed to thrive in it. They moved like ghosts at the perimeter of the small, shuffling group. Jax took the lead, the massive barrel of the negotiator sweeping back and forth, a mobile turret of death. Eva took the rear, her eyes constantly scanning their back trail, her rifle never wavering. Chen stayed in the middle, helping the Elthar navigate the treacherous ground and keeping a medical scanner active. "They move like pack hunters," Lyra whispered to Xyler, her voice faint. "Observe their formation, the way they communicate with hand signals, the way they cover one another's fields of fire. This is not the behavior of a scientific species." "They are a species of survivors," Xyler replied, his gaze fixed on Eva's back. He watched the subtle shifts in her posture, the way her head tilted to catch a distant sound, the sheer physical confidence with which she moved through a world that should have killed her 100 times over. His people had outthought their environment. The humans, it seemed, had outfought theirs. The jungle was not finished with them. As they navigated a particularly dense patch of swamp, the water around them began to roil. Before anyone could react, a creature erupted from the murky depths. It was a river lurker, a serpentine horror with a wide, flat head and a maw filled with needle-like teeth. It lunged for one of the Elthar at the edge of the group. Jax was faster. He didn't even use the negotiator. In a single, fluid motion, he dropped the cannon into its sling, drew a combat knife the size of a Elthar's forearm from his belt, and met the creature's charge. He sidestepped its lunge, grabbing onto one of the fins near its head, and using his mass and the creature's own momentum to drive it back into the water. There was a furious thrashing, a spray of dark water and greener ichor, and then Jax rose, his armor dripping. The river lurker floated to the surface, its head almost severed from its body. "Stay out of the deep water," he grunted, as if he had just performed a minor chore and retrieved his cannon. The Elthar stared, speechless. Xyler felt his mind cataloging the event. Close quarters combat, blade weapon, reaction time under 1 second, termination of a Class 3 predator with 0 wasted energy. It was a data point so far outside their understanding of sentient behavior that it broke every model they had. Later, as they rested for a moment on a rare patch of solid ground, Xyler approached Captain Rostova. "Why?" he asked, the single word encompassing a universe of questions. "Your species is not part of the consensus. You have no obligation to us. This world, it is a crucible. Why would you willingly enter it for strangers?" Eva looked at him, her gray eyes thoughtful. She was cleaning the firing mechanism of her rifle with a small tool, her movements precise and practiced. "On my homeworld, there's an old saying. The mountain doesn't care who you are. It will kill you all the same. We learned a long time ago that the only thing you can count on when you're on the mountain is the person next to you. Doesn't matter what they look like. You're all just trying to get to the top, or in this case, off the damn thing." She gestured with her chin towards the jungle. "We've seen worlds like this before, colonized a few that were almost as bad. Humanity was born on a death world, you know. It wasn't as extreme as this, but it was full of things with claws and teeth, and a taste for soft creatures that had just figured out how to use tools. I guess it's in our blood. We don't see a place like this and think impossible. We think, what's the best way to get through it?" Xyler tried to process this. Born on a death world. The concept was staggering. The Elthar home world was a paradise, a garden where evolution had favored intellect and cooperation above all else. The idea that a species' entire evolutionary history was a continuous, brutal struggle against a hostile planet. It explained so much. It explained the armor, the weapons, the terrifying efficiency. Their very existence was a testament to their ability to inflict violence. You view the universe as a challenge to be overcome," Xyler mused aloud. "I view it as a place that's not actively trying to help you," Eva corrected. "So you help yourself. And you help anyone else you find stuck on the mountain, because one day you might be the one who needs a hand." Their conversation was cut short by a new threat. This one came from above. A screeching cry echoed from the canopy, and a winged terror, a skyshrieker, dived at them. It was a leathery, pterodactyl-like beast with a razor-sharp beak and talons that could gut a man. Chen reacted this time. He raised a device on his wrist, and a small drone detached, zipping into the air. The drone fired a series of high-frequency sonic pulses that disoriented the skyscraper, causing it to veer off course and crash into a tree. It was a non-lethal solution, elegant and effective. "Not everything requires a bullet," Chen said with a small smile, noticing Xyler's surprised expression. "Sometimes a headache is enough." It was another paradox. The medic, the healer, was just as capable in this environment as the soldiers. He understood the dangers and had his own tools to neutralize them. The humans were not just brutes, they were adaptable, multifaceted survivors. The final approach to the Griffon was a desperate race against time. The scent of the dead grave moths had attracted every predator for kilometers around. The jungle was now a frenzy of activity. The humans formed a tight, moving circle around the Elthar, a fortress of armor and firepower. The roar of the negotiator became the drumbeat of their march. They reached the clearing just as the alpha grave moth's mate, an even larger and more ferocious beast, broke through the tree line, followed by the rest of its pack. "Get them up the ramp," Eva shouted over the cacophony. "Chen, go, Jax, give me suppressing fire." Chen herded the terrified Elthar up the ramp of the dropship while Eva and Jax stood their ground, a final, unbreachable wall between the survivors and the horde. The noise was apocalyptic. The ground shook from the impact of kinetic rounds and the footfalls of charging monsters. Xyler, the last of the Elthar to enter the ship, turned at the top of the ramp. He watched as Eva, her rifle empty, drew her sidearm and continued to fire, taking down one of the smaller pack members. He saw Jax, roaring a defiant challenge, swing the red-hot barrel of his cannon like a club, smashing the skull of a creature that got too close. They were not retreating. They were covering a retreat, willingly placing themselves between certain death and the people they had come to save. Finally, they fell back, climbing the ramp as it began to rise. A grave maw lunged, its jaws snapping at Eva's heels just as the ramp sealed shut. Inside the trembling confines of the Griffon, there was a moment of stunned silence, broken only by the whine of the engines and the heavy panting of the two humans. Jax leaned against the bulkhead, his massive chest heaving. Eva stood by the cockpit door, reloading her rifle with steady hands, her face a mask of grim focus. They had made it. They had walked into the heart of a planetary death machine, faced down its alpha predators and brought the survivors out. To the Elthar, it was a miracle beyond comprehension. To the humans, Xyler realized with a shudder, it was just another Tuesday on the mountain. Aboard the Vagabond, the sterile, quiet calm of the human ship was a shocking contrast to the world they had just left. Chen was tending to Lyra's injuries in the small medbay. He had set her broken leg with a spray-on polymer cast and was administering a cocktail of advanced regeneration stimulants. His touch was gentle, his voice reassuring. The medic who had faced down monsters was now the epitome of a gentle healer. Xyler sat in the ship's small common area with Captain Rostova. The human had offered him a nutrient paste that was bland but effective. She was watching a replay of the events on a data slate, analyzing their own combat footage. Xyler found himself mesmerized by the recording. He watched the humans fight, but this time his analytical mind was not paralyzed by fear. He saw the intricate dance of violence, the precise application of force, the seamless communication. He saw predators at work, the most effective predators he had ever witnessed. "In our galactic classification system," Xyler began, his voice soft, "species are categorized based on their primary ecological and social function. My people are analysts and builders. Other species are cultivators or symbiotes. The grave moths would be classified as apex predators." Eva looked up from her slate, her expression curious. "And what are we?" Xyler hesitated. "Our protocols do not have a category for you. To be a spacefaring, tool-using intelligence is, by our definition, to have moved beyond the primal roles of predator and prey. You have the technology for space travel, for communication, for art and science, and yet you retain the instinct, the prowess. You don't just fight to survive, you fight to win. It is a fundamental aspect of your nature." "It had to be," Eva said simply, "or we wouldn't be here. We fought each other for millennia before we ever went to the stars. Fought the planet, fought the climate, fought disease. Struggle is our oldest teacher." "Our teachers were logic and philosophy," Xyler said. We believe that civilization is the process of caging the beast within. You seem to have tamed it and taught it to hunt for you. A few days later, they rendezvoused with a Elthar diplomatic vessel, the Serene Contemplation, in a neutral system. The transfer was a quiet, formal affair. Xyler and the other survivors were brought aboard their people's ship, a vessel of sweeping, elegant lines and silent, graceful technology. It felt like returning to a dream after a long nightmare. Xyler was immediately summoned to a formal debriefing with the Elthar Consensus High Council, who appeared as shimmering holograms in the ship's communication chamber. He stood before them, a simple xenobotanist now tasked with explaining a concept utterly alien to his entire civilization. He recounted the events of the crash and their desperate struggle for survival. Then, he came to the arrival of the humans. He didn't just tell them, he showed them. He played the helmet cam footage he had requested from Captain Rostova. A hush fell over the assembled holograms. They watched the raw, brutal footage from Xylos-Seven. They saw the armored humans moving through the lethal jungle. They witnessed the shocking violence of kinetic weapons tearing apart creatures that had seemed invincible. They watched Jax battle the river lurker with a knife. They saw Eva and Jax make their last stand at the ramp of the Griffon. When the footage ended, the silence in the chamber was absolute. It was the silence of 1,000 brilliant minds simultaneously encountering a concept for which they had no framework. Their technology is primitive, one of the counselors finally said, his voice laced with disbelief. Solid projectiles. Chemical reactions. It is the technology of a species in its infancy. An infancy spent in a cage with tigers, another counselor countered, his hologram flickering slightly. I have run a comparative analysis, stated a third, a data specialist. I cross-referenced the combat effectiveness of this human team against our threat matrix for every known alpha predator on every Class 4 world we have ever surveyed. The results are anomalous. Explain, the lead counselor commanded. The humans don't just match the predatory efficiency of a grave maw or a Thraxian dune stalker, the specialist explained. They exceed it. Their tactical adaptability, target prioritization, and threat neutralization speed are orders of magnitude greater. They did not enter an ecosystem and survive it. They entered an ecosystem, identified its apex predator, and systematically dismantled it. They became the apex. Xyler stepped forward. It is more than that, he said, finding his voice. They did this not for territory or for food. They did it to save us. They wield the tools of a predator, but they possess the compassion of a protector. This is the paradox. The debate that followed lasted for nearly a full cycle. They rewatched the footage, analyzed the humans' biometrics, their language patterns, their technology. They were attempting to fit a square peg into a round hole, to place this impossible new species into one of their neat little boxes. But humans did not fit. They were not prey. They were certainly not just predators. They were not symbiotes. They were something else entirely. Finally, the lead counselor, an ancient Elthar whose wisdom was legendary, raised a hand for silence. His hologram solidified, his gaze settling on Xyler. We have been short-sighted, the counselor said, his voice resonating through the chamber. Our classifications are based on species that evolve within a single, stable ecosystem. We have never encountered a species that is defined by its ability to master any ecosystem. He turned his gaze to the other counselors. They are not apex predators of a death world. Their homeworld conditioned them to be something more. They are a species that can enter any lethal environment in the galaxy, and through sheer force of will and adaptive brutality, become its apex predator. They are a walking, thinking, tool-using extinction event that chooses to be a rescue mission. A new classification began to form on the display next to the counselor. Old categories were pushed aside. Therefore, effective immediately, the counselor declared, his voice firm, the species known as humanity will be reclassified under a new, unique designation. They are to be considered meta-predators of death worlds. The words hung in the air, filled with a terrible weight. It was not a title of honor, nor was it an indictment. It was a statement of fact, a warning label for the entire galactic community. Our policy towards them must reflect this, the counselor continued. They are to be approached with the utmost caution, for they are capable of unimaginable destruction. but they are also to be treated with the deepest respect, for they are capable of equally unimaginable compassion. They are the ultimate paradox, and the galaxy is now a far more dangerous, and perhaps a far more hopeful place because of them. In the aftermath, Xylos found himself standing at a viewport on the serene contemplation, watching the small, rugged form of the vagabond prepare to depart. He had sent a final message to Captain Rostova, a simple expression of his people's infinite gratitude. Her reply had been equally simple: "Just glad we could help. Stay safe out there." He thought about the new classification. Meta-predator of death worlds. It was a terrifying label. It painted humanity as a force of nature, a galactic wildcard. Other species would see them now with a mixture of fear and awe. Treaties would be rewritten. Diplomatic protocols would be revised. The comfortable, predictable order of the galaxy had been permanently altered. But Xylos, who had stood in the shadow of the grave maw and then been shielded by the armor of Eva Rostova, saw something else. He saw a species forged in fire who had every reason to be cruel and selfish, yet chose again and again to climb the mountain for strangers. They were terrifying, yes. They were dangerous, absolutely. But they were also the only reason he was alive. As the vagabond jumped to hyperspace and vanished from view, Xylos was left with a single, profound thought. The galaxy had just met its most dangerous predator. And just maybe, it had also met its greatest hope.